Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. Hi, my name is Robbie Mickelson. I'm the organizer of ClimateLink, the meetup, and also the founder of ClimateLink, the company. And thank you for coming. So ClimateLink is many things, but tonight we're the meetup group. We meet monthly to showcase technologies being built to save the planet. And I've been organizing this for just over 2 years now. We've grown from about 600 to almost 2,000 here in San Francisco. We're about in 5 cities now, and about 10,000 across the total network with partner organizations. And so just real quick on the schedule. So we'll run through about 10 minutes of introductions and announcements. Then we'll get into actually why you came, the talks about the cool tech. And then we'll have some more networking and food, and then we go home. So PG&E blocks, we've created a little check-in to actually see who's here, and also so I can get your emails to send you the resources from tonight, the video, the decks if they get shared, other specific announcements that get spoken. So either on the meetup page itself, or I just sent an email just before the meetup started to the list. So if you could go there and click on that link to check in and give me your email address, that'd be greatly appreciated. If not, no worries, you just won't get the good stuff. So first, I'd like to thank Pete. Pete Shoemaker runs the PG&E Pacific Energy Center, and they're our hosts, so let's all thank Pete, and he'll tell us about it.
Me personally, of course, no. Thanks. I'm actually one of the people on staff here, and this is a PG&E facility, it's the Energy Training Center. First off, I have to do some brief safety announcements. If things start shaking, duck and cover, hold on under the tables. If we have to exit, go out the front door, half a block down to 4th and Howard where the carousel is, and we'll take our business there. You know where the bed restrooms are around the side under there. There's other restrooms on the 2nd floor against the far wall. How many people have been here before to attend a class? Great, well, a lot of people haven't, which is great. We love having Robbie's stuff here. It fits with our mission perfectly. We also would like to introduce you to this facility, which we think is a great, great resource, undiscovered resource for a lot of people for your careers and all kinds of things. This is a free training facility funded by a small surcharge on everybody's PG&E bills. It's called a Public Purpose Program Charge, and pays for a lot of other things, including the maintenance of this place. And there are all kinds of free classes here on a wide variety of energy topics, including solar and building commissioning and carbon. And we have evening lectures like this. We have all kinds of topics. Lighting, there's a lighting class going right over there in that classroom there. We also have an extensive tool lending library downstairs, over 5,000 tools with experts that will lend you tools for free. IR cameras and blower doors and sensors and loggers and things like that. So we're here to help you do all kinds of energy efficiency and renewable energy projects, all free. So please, come back again, take a look at our schedule. On the way out, you can get some resource material here. So happy to have you, and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. So normally there's Wi-Fi, but it's not working well tonight, so just use your own phone. The food that you've already found in the bathrooms. So real quickly on sort of ClimateLink, the mission. For the last several years, I've been working to deploy more capital into this space by matchmaking startups with appropriate sources of capital, whether that's investors, foundations, government agencies, family and friends, whomever. And it grew and grew through this network. And then after the IPCC report came out in October, it said, you've been talking about billions of dollars, suddenly you're about 1,000x off, we need trillions of dollars. So I said, okay, how do we get to that point? Well, the only reasonable way that we'll get to trillions of dollars in the time frame that we have to limit our temperature rise below 3 degrees Fahrenheit is if we have the biggest banks involved actually putting capital towards this. So, and the only way that they'll do that is if there's a bank giving them competition. So the plan is, let's start a bank to deploy hundreds of billions of dollars. and force them to follow suit. So it's going to be awesome. B Corp, so it's do well by doing good. It'll live on your mobile phone. It's going to lend money for renewable energy, electric vehicles, ag tech, and it's going to be built off a network, a connected network of people in the system. So this is sort of what we've been building through the ClimateLink network and the different meetup groups over the past few years, and are starting to productize this. So creating the investment connections, the who's hiring whom, who becomes a customer of whom, so that we can actually create an automated system to help move the capital and resources flow through the economy more effectively. So that's more about sort of the giant mission. Now let's focus down on tonight. If you want to be more a part of the community, you can join us on Slack. Unfortunately, the bit.ly links don't work if you're on the Gecko network, but you can do that through your phone. We've got a YouTube channel, so we're recording all of the talks, and then we post them. So if you want to see Commissioner Hochschild of the California Energy Commission, or last month's talks on AI and machine learning for grid energy management, you can go there. So let's see. So I just started a newsletter that's going to go out every month to announce these meetups before we actually announce them on Meetup. How many of you got the email newsletter that wasn't from Meetup? All right. So just a couple people. Great. So you all have a chance to sign up for this. So in that, on the Meetup announcement, it'll only talk about the Meetup. But in the newsletter, it will include all the meetups, plus funding resources, other opportunities. So if you're interested in that, please check that out. We've got a jobs board, which is about to be transferred over to our new site. And next bullet point, who else is hiring? Anybody? Nobody's hiring. This is the first. Sweet. Is anybody looking for a job? One person, two people, 3, 4. Okay. So we've got a few job seekers, but nobody's hiring. Okay. Normally we do. Michael is hiring. What are you hiring for?
I'm looking for data scientists. My company, Evolve Energy, we do a couple things. We pair wholesale dynamically changing prices with autonomous load response. So data scientists, please come check me out afterwards.
Great.
What's the name of the company?
Evolve Energy.
Anybody else? Diego,
Yes.
are you hiring?
Yes, we are hiring, and I can.
Yeah.
speak
So
about
Diego's
that.
one of our speakers, and he'll talk about it when he gets up here.
Yeah.
Great. Thomas, Carbon Lighthouse, are you? I'm sure you guys are hiring.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I'm at Carbon Lighthouse. We do demand-side energy efficiency work in commercial real estate. We are hiring data scientists and software engineers.
Great. One other thing that I talked about in the newsletter is that we're looking at actually creating an incubator for the climate tech community in the Bay Area. So it will have both co-working space as well as functional lab space. So if you're doing materials, chemistry, biotech, if you're building a biogasifier and you need combustion space, that will all be there, as well as directly connected into the mentor and capital networks that we built up. Quick show of hands, is anybody interested in that? Co-working? Yeah, 2, 3, 4, okay. And so, now for the actual purpose of being here. We're going to start off with Chris Bean from Google. Chris has been working on the Environmental Insights Explorer team for the past few years now, and he's wholly dedicated towards using his software engineering training to help reduce emissions. And he's been trying to keep it cool for almost 2 decades now. He started an ice cream shop. That was his first job. Wow. All right, sorry, that was corny. Anyway,
It's a joke, not mine.
yeah. So please give it up for Chris from Google.
Thank you for dropping that off.
Does this work? Clicker?
It should, if you plug in the dongle.
Okay. I'll hold both of these. Forgive me if I talk into the clicker and click the mic. Hello everyone, my name is Christopher Bien. As already mentioned, software engineer at Google. I am somewhat new in my career to the climate space and sort of more recent climate warrior. I started up in ads, like many, and kind of found myself here on a very long meandering path as my new passion to pursue. So how many of you have heard of the Environmental Insights Explorer? Curious, okay. All right. All right, well that means that this is the right crowd to talk to. So recently in September at Global Climate Action Summit, we launched the mouthful, I know, we shorten it to EIE sometimes. And I'll be talking a little bit about that today. I'll do a quick walkthrough through the UI, not a lot of demo, and then we'll go over some Q&A, and that's really where I would love to hear from all of you, because we're actually a really early team, and there are a number of different things that we're trying to get a feel for. So really any feedback is appreciated, any thoughts, ideas, etc. So first off, this was a labor of love between, again, our really small, scrappy team at Google and the Global Covenant of Mayors, or GCOM. They came to us some number of years ago and talked about some of the challenges that they were having. That many, for those of you that don't know, it's kind of one of the collections of cities that are committing to address climate change all over the world. And they found that they had a challenge, which was to, a lot of these cities have committed to reducing emissions, but the next step they tend to be stuck at, which is how do you measure it before you take action. So we're really grateful to have their expertise as part of this process. So what's our vision here? In really, really short, it's insights to solutions. We have a really unique data set at Google, as you might imagine, and there's quite a lot of interesting things that I think we can do with that, especially when it comes to quantifying the emissions of our real world, and ideally informing climate action plans, programs and policies at the local level or city level, and the sort of blank solutions in the space that are possible that we haven't even thought about, frankly. So you may see that we sometimes say Environmental Insights Platform or Explorer. If I kind of say that, the Explorer refers to the actual tool that's launched, whereas the platform is kind of the larger team and the larger set of suite of things that we're still trying to figure out and explore. So some of our users tend to be at the city stakeholder level. These are some of the relationships that we've been able to build. And both Victoria, Canada, and Buenos Aires are part of our launch, where we launched 5 cities this past fall. But it's not limited to that. So yes, we really want to inform policies at the government level, but I think there's an interesting angle for even the concerned citizen to kind of play with the light scenario modeling, if you will, and use that as a way of starting dialogue with folks around them, other concerned citizens, and who knows, maybe even kind of pitch it to some of their local representatives. The ideal for us and kind of why we're focusing on cities, as you all probably know, it is more than half and quickly growing percentage of the global population. And of course, being in cities, we tend to generate the most emissions. So it's in that, but at the same time, the city is local enough, so it kind of fits that Goldilocks zone of kind of subverting some of the, maybe national the national politics that are happening, but also taking a really big bite out of the problem. So again, we felt that was a really good place to kind of use as a fulcrum. So a couple of aspects about this where we want folks to be able to interact freely with the data. It's a free tool, and we want people to be able to get a sense of the overall scale of their city. So the data tends to be quite aggregated over a year time scale, over large buckets, for many reasons, of course, including privacy. But also because we see that some of those patterns we really want to tease out at a larger level. And over time, we want for it to be a place or a hub to link to solutions. Right now, those can be references. Hopefully in the future, as more cities start to deploy tactics and be able to tie performance around that, maybe that's an element that we can pull in the future. So if you want to play with it yourself, you can. It's at insights.sustainability.google. And what is it? So when you go to the Explorer, as I mentioned, we launched with 5 cities. These are the 5. We really have to balance kind of really touching on cities all across the globe, small cities, big cities, but at the same time cities that have data that we can actually validate against. And that's a whole tricky thing unto itself. And when you dive into any one city, you're going to see a couple of things. We have 4 key data sets, 3 of which are shown here. On the left are sources of emissions, building energy and transportation. On the right are where we'd like to put, hopefully, a growing list of solutions. And currently we have mapping your solar potential. Some of you, maybe many of you, are aware of Project Sunroof. Work with a lot of folks on that team, so part of that has kind of been folded into the Explorer and one of the mitigation tactics that are available. So building emissions, I'll talk a little bit about the data. That is, if you basically think of Google Maps, that's essentially the easiest way to kind of explain the data that we're using. So that ranges from the building footprints, the categorizations of things, whether they are retail establishments, hospitals, hotels, etc., as well as even things like the building footprints, especially if we have 3D ones. So if you ever kind of zoomed in a little bit, you can see kind of a 3D outline of building. We're using that to feed into our model to calculate building energy. And on the transportation side, of course, Google Maps, navigation is a big aspect, is a big part of that. We are using trips data, aggregated over a year, and a couple of dimensions that we'll dig into later, but aggregated at these large scales, as well as location history opt-in. On the solar side, a couple of things that power that are helicopter imagery, satellite imagery, for those that know Earth Engine, that's one of the underpinnings, and a super, super cool tool. My mind was absolutely blown when I first laid eyes on that. So if you don't know that, definitely check that out, especially for the GIS folks in here. And so also, and of course, some Google Maps as well, as I mentioned, kind of footprints, building footprints, and that sort of thing to calculate solar potential. The 4th data set is kind of what I like to, the kind of doom and gloom, or...
Bad question.
Do you mind a question in
Sure, yeah.
So if somebody in the city, if the mayor managed to pass a stricter building code, and all the buildings now have to have double pane windows, you wouldn't see it or do you see it in the data set?
That's a great point. No, we wouldn't see that.
So you assume it's kind of average building efficiency kind of?
Yes, yeah. Yeah, and so that was one of the aspects that we worked with GCOM on, was to, we'll see later, kind of the average intensity use per square meter. And so that comes from some of the GCOM data and the work that they have access to. I think the World Resources Institute helped to build out some of that. So yeah, we do have those averages. And then, so tactics that happen, we aren't going to be able to see that in real time. But it is an interesting aspect to try and encompass.
I really didn't understand how did you get from Google Maps to numbers to the footprint? Did you create a methodology to calculate the footprints? How do you really get there? Because it's not really...
Yeah, so the footprints in Google Maps, when you kind of really get kind of close and closer and you really zoom in, those footprints already exist. So that's how we classify this whole graph with things like the name of the establishment and so the things that you see like phone numbers and hours and all that sort of thing, that gets attached to a real space, an actual kind of polygon drawn in space. So we gather all our footprints from that, and of course the maps team continues to improve that.
So are you, when you say footprint, you're talking about carbon footprint with emissions factor, and you are...
Yeah, good.
Is that what you're saying, or is it different footprint?
I actually mean the actual building footprint, so the actual area of the footprint. But you bring up a good point that, of course, we are calculating the carbon footprint, and we do account for emissions factors. So we have, again, in partnership with GCOM, we use emissions factors from CURB, the climate, I don't even know what it stands for, Climate for Urban Sustainability.
California Air Resources Board.
That's CARB.
That's CARB. So the tool is CURB. It's this huge, massive spreadsheet that is powerful. But so anyway, we use emissions factors from that, and it's also a huge element, huge thing we're looking into to try and understand how we can improve on that. Because as it sounds like emissions factors are very coarse, and come with a lot of assumptions.
Do you have? Is it open, the sources? Out of the sources of the data where you are collecting this data, or at least you say it, where is it coming from? I imagine CARB use IPCC emission factors, but why you choose CARB anyway. But I'm just thinking, how can I access these real numbers? Because they look weird to me.
So we have a methodology site, part of the site, so definitely check that out. If you have deeper questions, where there's both a feedback form and come talk to me after, I can shoot you my email and we can definitely chat about that further. Of course, the underlying Google data from Maps, that of course is not open. But the emissions factors and as well as the methodology, I would say, is fairly transparent. But we have to make sure we keep our our legal team happy and kind of not expose any of our data and of course all that good stewardship. Does that help?
Yes.
Okay, great. So we are repurposing some NASA Earth exchange models and scaling them to the city level and kind of projecting this business as usual. I think one of the bits of feedback that we've heard is that 20 years is kind of too far, so I think we're considering pulling that time scale in to maybe make it feel more urgent. But really just a very simple way of showing, giving folks a sense of what could be to come. So maybe this will also help, as we get into kind of walking through the tool, feel free to ask questions. But what I'd like to do is kind of walk through sort of a user story of sorts where, where this is how we envision cities using it and some of the feedback that we're hearing. So as a fictional scenario, we want to be able to have cities ask themselves kind of questions like this. And this is, of course, a very oversimplified scenario, and we're only going to be playing with 2 dimensions here. But let's say, Melbourne, like the city of Melbourne. They're looking to reduce commercial emissions by 5% in 2 years. Again, these are not their actual commitments, but just throwing some numbers out there. They want to do this because 86% of their building energy emissions come from the commercial side. At the same time, they want to grow economically. So they're looking to add 10 million square meters of office space, right, to attract new business to the area. How might they go about this? Well, they jump into the building energy section of EAE. And when you're there, you see a couple of things. You're going to see the residential and non-residential breakout. That's one of the bits of metadata that's attached to our kind of building, graph within Google Maps. Not only can you see that breakout, but we're going to play with the customizing section here. And this is really where we kind of like to say this light scenario modeling comes into play. If you go there, you're going to be presented with this screen, and there are a couple of knobs that you can turn. You've got floor space. You have the energy use intensity, which is the kilowatt hours per square meter per year, as well as the carbon intensity. So how much, what is your emissions per unit? And then we have a breakout between electricity and fuel. These values are seeded with the emissions factors that we got from our work with GCOM. And then so you can play with these ratios here as well as the carbon intensity of each. So going back to our scenario, we want to add 10 million square meters of office space, so go ahead and go do that. If you were in the tool live, you'd see that the estimate is going to obviously increase, right? As we add floor space, but keep everything else the same. And in the case of Melbourne, in the city, they want to understand, like, well, if that's the goal, what can they do next? What are some of the values that they can play with to maybe get to, let's say, that 5% emissions? So you can do things like maybe decrease energy use intensity. Maybe that's tied to a program of upgrading LED lighting, or kind of incentives around LED appliances at home, or something of that sort. In my case, I wanted to play with the grid intensity, and to me, it felt like 10% maybe seems reasonable. I don't know. This is really where the folks that are working with this tool are going to bring their contextual understanding of their city and kind of add meaning to these numbers and why they're choosing these numbers. I'm not kind of saying that this is necessarily feasible, cheap, or any of that sort. But if we reduce that by 10%, we can see, okay, we can get to an emissions reduction of 6%, a modest 6%. Again, this is a fairly straightforward scenario. There's a lot of complexity to unpack, right? In terms of what this means. Obviously, adding building space means that you're going to have impacts on transportation. You're going to have impacts on other things that are going to add to the carbon equation here. So this is not meant to model all of those things. This is sort of we'll leave that to the PhDs, if you will. But this is to begin to really start that dialogue around what might be possible and how might that affect numbers in really at scale. So another example here, we'll kind of take it one notch up, and we'll head to Buenos Aires. And they're looking to add electric buses to their fleet powered by solar plus storage. So it's a lot to say in a single sentence. Please don't excoriate me for that. But they're thinking of doing this. They see this opportunity to shift transportation modes, as well as needing to buy these buses. They also, and this is actually a real thing, that Buenos Aires has over the course of the last I think decade or so been adding a lot of bicycling infrastructure. So they're looking to take advantage of all these things. And how might they go ahead and use transportation? Well, if they come into the transportation section of their city, they'll see a couple things. One, on the right, are the travel bounds. So the general percentage and number of trips that are heading into a city, out of a city, and stay within the bounds, so starting and ending in your city. We will break those trips out, as well as the overall number of trips, by mode. And I know I'm going to get this question, how do we calculate or how do we get to these modes here? For the most part, we infer them. We will, as you're traveling throughout, we're using a number of different signals to infer the type of thing that you're doing. So obviously, if you're moving at 60 miles an hour over a freeway, you're probably not walking. If you are moving at vehicle speed, but that corresponds with starts and stops that over known transit lines, there's a good chance that you're going to be on public transit. You can actually look at this data yourself. If you're signed in on Maps and you look at your timeline feature, this is powered by the same data. So I know I would use the Google Maps kind of catch-all here, but a lot of this is really built on a lot of the great features that other teams in Google have built already, and we're actually just leveraging a lot of that.
So I switched mine off because of privacy reasons, so I'm not counting as it was.
Shame on you.
Privacy,
Yes.
global warming, added.
Yes, exactly, yeah. So if you're not opting in, you won't be a part of the sample. It's an interesting aspect that we have to account for. Obviously, all models tend to upscale by a number of different factors. This is going to be one of those for us, and it's quite a difficult one. You just have lots of different usage patterns, cultural things, socioeconomic aspects that factor into this as well. So it may be one of our biggest challenges, that and emissions factors being our next one. So back to our scenario here. If you dive into, I kind of glossed over this on that previous page, but Buenos Aires is looking to dive into the inboundary trips. So the trips that start and end within the city, their reasoning there might be because they have a little bit more control over that, and they're shorter trips. And of course, the bus fleet is going to, we're going to wave the magic wand and operate on a hub and spoke model. So, they're going to be roughly within city limits. So if we go into the inboundary section, so there are the three, in, out, and within, we're going to focus on these three modes. And I'm going to pull some numbers out of my magic hat here and say, our team, has done some work, and we think that maybe 3% of these miles are mode shiftable, if that's even a word. So let's go with that. Of course, those miles have to go somewhere. People still have to get around, and we're going to be leveraging the bus and bicycling infrastructure. So let's take those miles and add that to buses and bikes, and that will increase your bus number by approximately 12% and add on about 5% cycling miles as well. Those numbers seem actually pretty reasonable to me. Again, I don't really have the context to really understand what this might mean. This is really for that city planner to do. But for example, when I was doing some research around this, the cycling infrastructure that's been added, when they did this some number of years ago, and they added about 100 kilometers of road. I think they were able to, in the early years, triple cycling. So of course, this is a small number on a big number, so that's going to have some impact. But again, this is really just kind of to illustrate what we think and hope is possible. Since we added all these awesome new buses and are just pulling all their energy from our lovely sun, we'll work in the carbon intensity of that as well, and so we'll decrease our overall carbon intensity, and then that leads to a modest 4%. I think it's important and interesting to note that these numbers are modest. I'm curious how folks generally feel about that, because it's an urgent thing that we're dealing with, and we all probably want to see numbers that are bigger than this, and it can maybe feel slightly demoralizing. But at the same time, there is a reality of just the world in which we have to work in, so we, better for worse, have to take a bit of an incremental approach. And then of course this is year over year, so it'll really hopefully compound over time. And if we were to have this all magically happen, of course there are other benefits, right, to this that are harder to quantify. We're not doing that here, but the business activity around bike hubs tends to increase when you lay down new bicycling infrastructure. Obviously people are moving, so they hopefully are at least a little bit healthier. There will be some better air quality and less congestion due to those reduced miles as well. So one of the aspects that we make available is this concept of sharing. Really, all it is kind of just saving that data so you can send it around and share the customized estimates that you were able to make. This is an interesting element that we're looking at because we're really not sure how people might use this. What we hope for it to do is, again, we also get this conversation happening around a little bit more data. And if you all have ideas on how this can be more impactful, I would love to hear them.
Question. So,
Sure.
Do you have any plans with the data where you can perhaps come up with an optimization model for traffic patterns? If you see a bunch of cars going back and forth from point A to B and then back all the time, maybe put a bus line there. Something like that, which is a little bit more intense.
Absolutely,
Chris,
yeah.
can you
So
re-
this is.
Can you repeat the question?
Are there plans to really take the modeling up a notch and project or predict changes in the system and take into account other signals like traffic and congestion?
Yeah, I mean, in a way, so in a way it is predicting, but you're also just kind of coming up with an optimization model such that you can optimize traffic flow, but better yet, optimize the carbon emissions associated with, say, one particular road in your city because it's just constant traffic.
Yeah. Right now, no. In the short term, we do get asked that quite a bit. Frankly, I think the short answer is it's kind of not really that's not our forte in the sense that this is, we're looking at this from a kind of data and kind of engineering perspective, but not necessarily from a kind of, we're not domain experts in this space that I think we are thinking about it, but that there are no plans for that because there are a lot of other folks that do it. And honestly, we're kind of not sure exactly how to approach that just yet. But it's something that we're thinking about, but again, there are no plans to do that.
I think if you connect it with some of your data scientists who run optimization models and develop optimization models, they, starting at a small scale, I'm sure they come up with something that could inform urban planners and transportation planners how to better design their city.
So, I guess my thought is that's a pretty complicated tool. It's slightly different than what they're doing, and there are many companies who make those tools.
Yeah, no, thank you. So exactly that. So I didn't want to sort of go on the record saying Google couldn't tackle such complexity. But it's not really, I guess, where our phase is at right now. So going back to the GCOM cities, they are stuck at the stage of having any data at all. So I guess we're kind of in the crawl phase. Is that possible? Could it be in the future? Is it going to be doable? Probably. But it's just so far ahead. Like honestly, we just haven't really. There are so many things to get right at this foundational level that we haven't even really begin to dig too deep into that. And yeah, there are, I'm sure there are PhDs in this audience right now that have done this sort of stuff. It is super complex. And so, yeah.
I don't have a PhD, but I have a question. Did the cities you mentioned, the 5 pilot cities, did, like say Buenos Aires already have a carbon footprint for transport and building energy usage?
Building energy, they did. I don't think they've done a transportation study before. I would say that, of course, your Paris, Oakland, New York City, they have done that, but your long tail of cities have not. They're kind of not even that.
They did.
place.
They actually did.
Buenos Aires? Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm just really curious about what is the goal, real goal of this tool, because these look like very random numbers to me. I mean, I work for the C4E together with Pat, the mayor of Rio, from this complex of mayor that you just mentioned, in Clay and Road Resources Institute, and you know, I do see lots of potential in terms of collecting different types of data, but how do you qualify these methodologies? And you know, those 4% could mean something for public policies. But if they are just random numbers, nobody's going to use that as a reference, you know. So I'm just really curious about what is really the goal with this tool. If you guys intend to get approval from, you know, YN, FCCC, or any other organization to you know, really be able to quantify impact in a different way that it's being done today. You know, I see potential, but I'm kind of lost of how you guys are even making this calculation. So what's the goal? What's your main goal?
The goal is to try and unblock cities so they can start informing climate action plans and these solutions. From what we have heard, and maybe this is not your experience, that tends to be the sticking point. So you can't act on what you don't measure, and they're having trouble measuring, and then so therefore they don't act. That's really goal number one, is to try and unblock that. The data, as you know, is super complex. Its accuracy is something that we're going to refine over time and keep considering, keep looking at. I would say that we're trying to do that in parallel. So these aren't, also, and to address the question around validation, so where we have some ground truth, so either VMT, VKT studies that cities have already done, we try and match those methodologies. We look at the comparison of our GHG number to theirs. We do some other kind of QA things to understand, to ensure that for the most part, there's no weirdness in the data or kind of like large anomalies. You shouldn't generally see too many trips coming into the city but never leaving the city. That would just kind of generally be kind of weird, right? So there's a symmetry there that I think is that you would mostly expect. So there are things around that we're going to try and improve that. But I'll be the first to say that this is our first stab at this, and that the nature of the problem is so difficult that there is no ground truth. But what we do hope is that because we get such good coverage, right, especially global coverage, right, so we're trying to act at the global scale, not necessarily just have one city or another city kind of improve, that we kind of think that this is better than the status quo for many of the cities that are out there, and that the scale of our data is maybe enough to potentially be transformational. How are we doing on time?
What about 5 more minutes?
5 more minutes, okay. Let me get through this real quick, and then let's just jump right to Q&A, because I think that's kind of where we're seeing a lot of that. So sunroof and kind of the data that feeds into here. What we're looking for cities to really think about is how can they take advantage of their unique solar potential. We have a great case study working with San Jose around this. I won't go too deep into this, but you can all play with this yourself. Again, much of it is pulled from sunroof. San Jose was able to use sunroof as one of the considerations for their climate action plan, so we're excited for this. They're using some of this information to inform the 1 gigawatt project that they're putting up. And lastly, this is where this is sort of an open field. One of the things that we're considering is whether or not there should be an API for this and what that would look like. So I would love for you all to sort of complete the sentence and and send feedback through the, there is a feedback form through the site itself. You know, you can report a bug and also to send feedback. Come to me to me afterwards and talk to me and kind of, you know, tell me, you know, if you were able to use an environmental insights API, what would that look like? What would you like to see? What would you like to do with it? All right.
My question is, first, how long does it take for you to build out the city, given the current level of depth of this data? And, yeah, sorry, I
No, so there are a couple ways of answering that.
Repeat the question.
How long does it take for us to calculate dispersity? The incremental city is, you know, in terms of running the calculation, is pretty quick and easy. It's really about the validation bit. So, you know, we are trying to kind of develop a global model to fit onto all cities. This is a challenging thing. And there are just going to be so many nuances that are going to be difficult to capture. So the question is really about how long does it take to validate an additional city, and what does that look like, and can we kind of develop a pattern over time? So to produce a bad number, quick. To produce a really good one is sort of still up for grabs.
So how long did it take out to build out, say, San Jose?
So we didn't do San Jose for EIE as a whole. It was just that San Jose used the Project Sunroof data to inform their work. But I would say we've been kind of working on this for through the past year. So it's still kind of early innings, but yeah, we have put a little bit of work into it. So 1 year for 5 cities, not super great, but I think we can improve on that. Right there.
Yep. It's well known that cities emit CO2, cars, et cetera, power plants. Has there been any consideration of using CO2 sensors at a high altitude, you know, over cities to, as one data point, to see if that would correlate, you know, with the number of car trips and so forth? Is that a possibility, you think?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the exact thing that Earth Engine is good for. So can we use remote sensing and you know, various sensors, CO2 sensors, Sentinel-5P has, I think, to correlate. Yes, that is absolutely something that we're thinking about. Are we doing that right now? No, not just yet. Again, this team is very small. So hopefully we can build to that over time.
How can we increase your team? Because we all need to know. We're in Alameda on an island, so we're going underwater here.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think part of that is to help us, how can this tool unblock cities on this? Cities are users. If they can come to this and say, this is useful, I saw this, did this, that is going to release the resources increasingly so. I would hope to address that, to take into account these things. And of course, cities are going to care about how valid the data is, how trustworthy it is. So that is just, you know, really if nothing else, a single point that we have to get right.
Do you just use Google data for transportation, or do you collaborate with Apple or any of the other large players?
Nope.
No what?
No, like we have not collaborated over this. We don't use their data sets. I don't think we would even bother to ask, because I'm pretty sure the answer would be no. There obviously would be very significant privacy considerations as part of that as well. So no.
So how do you account for the discrepancy between, obviously not everyone uses Google Maps, so do you just scale up, or how do you?
Yes, exactly. That was kind of what I was talking about earlier. You know, I sort of like to think of it as we have fewer assumptions and fewer things to scale by, but that also increases the weight of each of those variables. And it is just a super complex thing, right? As you sort of touched on, penetration rate of different usage habits and devices, and even the quality of the device, it matters so much across the world that it matters never.
And sorry, one last thing about that. Are you guys using, I saw rooftop solar only. I mean, are you not looking at ground mount solar or other types of systems that would?
Currently rooftop only. One more?
So I was really interested in the slide you showed where you could send feedback to a city, and thinking about, mostly you talk about this from the user being at a city, but also as a public engagement tool.
Mm-hmm.
And so what are the current lines of thought in that area? Is that something, like what have been said about that in cities, or where do you see that going?
The sharing feature, this tool is primarily designed for city stakeholders, but the concerned citizen, there is this kind of potential for them to kind of create a scenario and share that and somehow kind of use that to increase engagement or conversation around that particular thing, right? Did I get that right?
Yeah. So I'm asking, I guess, where do you see that going anywhere or having traction? Or?
Yeah, so we are putting that out there as a really short way of testing that. So the jury is still out. I don't know of anything that sort of is like that, but if that is one of the outcomes, that would be a very interesting one.
Let's give it up for Chris. Thank you again. And he'll be around after if you want to ask him some more questions. And I'll also email out his email address for anybody who's given that to us. So our next speaker is Diego Saez-Gil, the founder and CEO of Pachama. You need a USB-C. I'll grab that. So while I'm speaking, I'll just walk over here and grab this box. So Diego is a serial entrepreneur. Before this, he built the world's first GPS smart suitcase. You might have seen it, I think, was it Kickstarter? So yeah, you can open that. So this suitcase, it had a battery pack, it had a GPS, you could find it with your phone. So in case the airport lost it, you knew exactly where it was in the world, and then you could tell them where to send it to you. And that finished, to say nicely. And then he decided to start up Pachama this last fall, it was October, right?
That's right.
Yeah. So Diego will tell us how he's going to help us save the forest.
Thank you very much, and thank you everyone. Let's see if this loads. Yes, as Ravi said, I'm the founder of Pachama. It's a new startup, and yes, what we're trying to do is to unlock nature to help solve climate change. And we say that our technology has been under development for over 3 billion years, photosynthesis converting carbon into biomass. And the insight for this idea came, yes, after, I've been an entrepreneur for 8 years in the US. I'm originally from Argentina. And I learned a lot about Silicon Valley, building technologies, building teams, and implementing compliance markets. And some of them are doing it for the right reasons, right? So there are many companies that in their boards, they decided that they want to be carbon neutral, and they started buying carbon credits. So we said, okay, here there is something. Last year, according to the World Bank, over $80 billion went into carbon markets, both through compliance markets and carbon tax initiatives. There are commitments for over $5 billion for forest carbon projects. There is a program called the Red Plus program, sponsored by the UN. And if we were to unlock these 2 billion hectares of potential restoration for the planet, this would be the ability to capture 80 gigatons of additional CO2 every year, with the potential for $800 billion in carbon offsets that could come from these corporations. This is almost twice the money that Apple has in the bank. So it's not that much money in the corporate world. But when we look at how the certification and verification of forest carbon credits are done today, it's actually very inefficient, and it doesn't use a lot of technology. So most of the verifications are done manually. They send crews to the forest to measure the size of the trees, to estimate how much biomass a tree has. They do partial measures and extrapolations. The process takes several years. It costs hundreds of thousands of dollars that have to be paid by the project developer, which is basically the forest owner. And then it's difficult to monitor periodically what happens afterwards. You certify a forest for carbon projects. So as a result of that, not many people around the world are doing certification of forest and using that to finance forest restoration projects. And as a result of that, also companies are not actually buying that many forest carbon credits. Most of the budget for carbon credits are actually going to other type of projects that are actually less impactful in terms of taking carbon out of the atmosphere. So this is the idea that we got. So let's start a platform that brings fast, affordable, and reliable verification using satellite images, drone images, LiDAR data, harnessing all the technology that we have today for remote sensing, and machine learning algorithms, deep learning algorithms that actually work today to estimate biomass on a picture, to project and predict future biomass changes. And then let's build a platform that makes it very, very easy for a forest owner to participate in this market and to sell these carbon credits to these buyers that we mentioned before. And this is what we're building. We just got started and are still, figuring out what's the best way to, add value. Is a lot of things that need to be built. But we basically started with the basics of, okay, let's look at what are the satellite images that are available out there, and let's start working with them. So we took a forest project in Peru in the Amazon and started playing around with their data, and I arrived to the conclusion that yes, a lot of precision can be achieved with remote sensing methodologies. So here's a little video of that we used to introduce the company today. We did it with my cousin in 1 week, so it's not really good quality, but it explains a little bit what we do. Let's see.
You might need to tether to your phone or my phone.
Well, yeah. Let's see here. Okay, it doesn't matter. You can go to the website, and the website, the video is on the website. Basically, the video explained the same time I explained to you. So, yes, this is a team. We're just, a few engineers and founders with some experience building some technology platforms. We just hired this guy, though, that did his PhD in forest remote sensing, and he actually scanned the entirety of New England and measured biomass and carbon storage of forests in New England and compared that to ground data and achieved total precision. And so we're very excited to start using the algorithms that he developed to do the same in other parts of the world, like South America and the Amazon. So one of the things that we did also as we started, the company, we started going and meeting with forest owners, trying to understand their problems and their situation. And in doing so, we got connected to over 150,000 hectares of certifiable land in South America. And it was a great validation to see that people want to participate in this. The people that own native forests in South America, they actually would rather not cut it down to do agriculture, but they need to get paid, right? So this is a mechanism that can actually help them have an income out of protecting the forest, and this income can actually be used to restore many areas that were cut down for pasture in the past, in which it makes a lot of economic sense to do reforestation today. So the why now kind of question is, all these technologies weren't available 5 years ago. Nanosatellites that can produce high frequency, high resolution images. We have companies such as Planet Labs today and Capella, Satellogic that are producing these images. Deep learning algorithms, finally they work so well thanks to Silicon Valley. We can use those algorithms. And then drones that actually have a high range. We're talking with several companies that are doing autonomous drones that recharge themselves, and then they can go and scan large plots of land. LiDAR. LiDAR is a technology that's being pushed forward by self-driving cars most recently, and you can purchase actually a LiDAR device for $700 that is this size that you can attach to a drone, and then you can have a three-dimensional cloud of points that then you can analyze with machine learning algorithms and get very specific with the estimation of biomass in a forest. And then finally the Paris Agreement, which to me is a form of technology. The Paris Agreement actually has changed a lot of things, and while what we read in the news is that the President of the US wants to leave the Paris Agreement, the reality is that all over the world there are more and more regulations coming into place to make companies compensate for their emissions, and it's actually also making the voluntary market grow. So our moonshot goal for the next 5 years is to help restore 1 million hectares of forest, which is the size of Hawaii Island. And to do that, we just need to make this technology work at scale. It will take a lot of work, and it will take a lot of collaborations with the different verification bodies that are out there. But the technology is there, the demand for carbon credit is there, and the land to do reforestation is there. So it's just about making it happen, hopefully. What we need, we need to connect with carbon buyers, we need to connect with forest project developers, and we do need talented people that want to work for this mission. So come talk to me if you are looking for a new opportunity. We're a small team, but we're going to be adding new team members in the next few months. So that's Pachama, and questions. Thank you so much. Yes.
Thank you so much for the talk. It's super interesting, and I appreciate the passion a lot. I have a question about a few years ago, Rafael Correa in Ecuador, who was governing Yasuni, which is the most biodiverse place on the earth, told the UN, I'm going to put this part of the Amazon, I'm going to conserve it if you pay up. I've told you the World Bank, the IDB, all these corporations, and none of them fulfilled the promise. The demand for credits was there. So what other dynamics have changed beside technology that can make your project successful?
Yeah, no, absolutely. There are a lot of failure stories about this type of frameworks from the past. And it's unfortunate because it reduces the credibility of all these ideas that are actually really good. I would say that, as I said, one of the problems that forests used to have for carbon credits is that it's very difficult to monitor what happens in the forest, right? So there are many stories in which a project got certified and then the owners of the land didn't honor the commitments of not cutting down the trees, right? And there was no way to get sort of like monitor that in real time. But now with satellite images with high frequency, you can monitor in real time, you can give more credibility to the buyers. And then in the side of the buyers, I mean, yes, the carbon credits markets have been around since the Kyoto Protocol, right? Started in the 90s. In the 2008-2009 crisis, it crashed. Companies didn't care about climate change anymore. I think that number one, the Paris Agreement, again, is a big push for the compliance market. And for the voluntary market, frankly, stakeholders are starting to demand companies. Last week, I don't know if you saw in the New York Times, 6,000 employees of Amazon signed a letter to Jeff Bezos demanding action on climate change. The same week, the CEO of Shell announced a $300 million budget for carbon offset with a special focus on forest carbon credits. So yes, call me an idealist. I think this market has a new chance, a new life, and we'll try to contribute to make it happen.
So related to the previous question, can you just briefly explain what the economics are of turning cut down into trees, maintaining trees, and having trees increase their mass, and how
Sure.
people get compensated for that around the world?
Yeah, I mean, it's case by case, the economics are very complex, and I should say that there are two types of forest carbon credit projects. There is avoidance of deforestation, in which you measure the carbon storage of the forest, and then you have to estimate the probability of that forest being taken down, and then you're basically issuing certificates for this carbon that is avoided to be released to the atmosphere in a way. And then in the other hand, you have reforestation projects or basically restoration projects, forests that were degraded or deforested, in which you can bring on new biomass. And in terms of the economics, I mean, the price of carbon is not super clear, of carbon credits. Compliance markets generally try to establish a set price. The California cap and trade is around $15 per ton. The European Union trading scheme is around $30 per ton. And in the voluntary market, there is a wide range. But you could say that it ranges between $5 and $20 per ton, depending on the projects. Prices of carbon actually make sense in terms of the biomass that can be generated in a certain hectare to compete with other activities, right? And the answer is that there are a lot of areas in which that's true, right? There are many places around the world in which forests were taken down to do pasture or cattle ranching, and now these practices have changed and they use less land. So there is land that is maybe not suitable for agriculture today, but it could be reforested, right? So, and then when you look at the price of actually, or the cost of actually doing reforestation projects, it's actually the cheapest way to take out carbon from the atmosphere, as compared to any other technology that is in development today to capture carbon.
And how many tons do you get from a hectare? How many tons of carbon?
So in the Amazon, if you have a native forest that is standing, it has 200 tons per hectare. Yeah.
I wonder about the durability of that capture. It's important to capture a lot, but also to keep it there for a long time. So imagine that, like a dense weathering where you store CO2 in rocks is going to work, since it's a chemical bond that's very stable, it's going to have more value than trees. How do you see that? Do you pay a ton capture for a year? There's a price on the time that you store it, or how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, this is a concept of sort of like permanence and additionality, which are criteria that are considered in these projects, and they're generally formulas that consider the balance of carbon, because it's true. I mean, a forest, when a tree dies, and trees do die, like every living being, there's carbon that might be released, right? Although you can do management to assure that this carbon doesn't get released, to atmosphere, but there are formulas that consider these sort of fluctuations, and the other thing that I didn't mention, which is besides carbon capturing value of forests, there is a lot of other values like biodiversity and water balancing on ecosystems that have a secondary impact on climate. So sometimes even though the formulas also consider that, the protocols for forests also consider biodiversity value and sort of ecosystemic value of forest.
Which will not apply to the other system
Exactly.
I mentioned.
Yeah, and I think we should do everything. By the way, I think we should do air capture research. We should.
Air capture is not going to work, but
but we should try it. So like what I'm saying is that it's not that I'm a fundamentalist of forest. We want to work on this because somebody has to do it, right? But we should explore all technologies. Yes.
Hi. Well, to have a forest certification, you're assuming that there's a forest. But we also want to do reforestation to land that has been deforested.
Right.
So do you know of or foresee any programs that measure the potential of carbon offset and then pay in advance to incentivize landowners to reforest?
Yeah, I mean, definitely a good point in that today, if you want to do soy agriculture, you go to a bank and they lend you money. If you want to do reforestation for carbon credits, nobody will give you money. Although there are some financial institutions, but it's really little. So yes, that's one of the things that we also want to help with data that combines sort of like historical information about what was in the land in the last 20, 30 years, weather and topography and so forth. We could help estimate the potential for reforestation on different land areas, and then with that we could facilitate elements for these project developers to get financing and to sort of like not pre-sell carbon credits, but to get financing for the future carbon credits that could generate could be generated in the land.
One issue about it takes time for a tree to grow.
Yeah.
And so my mind has like a big gap right now between the seedling and a full-fledged tree. And I wonder where are the markers for that kind of carbon sequestering in growth patterns?
Yeah, that's part of the challenge. And again, today we do have the ability to basically scan an area that's been just reforested with drones and have a track of the saplings, and then you do a model to see how much carbon this forest is going to capture in the next 10, 20 years, and then based on that have sort of a financial model that help the project developer understand what the economics of the project are. And that's why many times there will be many projects combine avoidance of deforestation that can be paid right away with reforestation projects. Yeah.
Can I add to that? It's just that any carbon offset project, it's a long-term vision, so you're always going to think, if it's a transportation system, for example, you're only going to look at 10 years ahead, how much that metro system will be, transporting people, so it's kind of the same situation.
Yeah, but many of the protocols consider 100 years commitments for the projects. Yes.
So the pilot project you mentioned was in South America. Do you have anything happening here in the US? Because I would imagine the market here is way more complicated than, like, having a carbon market here is more complicated than others.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's complicated everywhere, to be honest. There are different complications in South America. But yes, we're starting to look now at California, the California protocols, and the California cap and trade market. And there's a lot of forest restoration that can be done in California after fires. We're looking at New England. We're looking at the Mississippi Basin. Yes, we're in the process of scanning all the potentialities and to understand where to focus first.
Okay, as a follow-up question, when you look at landowners, do you try to find owners who have large amounts of land, or are you also looking at like a tree that's like right outside here and why you?
So, yeah, I mean, today, because of the cost of certification, again, hundreds of thousands of dollars in some cases, that is such a barrier to entry that only big projects can participate in this market. One of the goals that we have is to make it cheaper and faster and easier to understand so that smaller forest owners can participate on the market. There are project developers that aggregate small forests, and then they together work on a verification. But yeah, I mean, we think that small landowners should be able to participate. Yeah.
And are you building your own protocol or just using the voluntary carbon system?
So for now, we are using the protocols that are out there and building basically a methodology that is aligned with the protocols that are out there. We hope in the future to contribute to the design of new protocols that consider the technologies that we have available today. Most of the protocols were designed many years ago, and while they get updated, I think there's definitely an opportunity to update the protocols for the new technologies.
Can you talk a little more about your modeling capabilities on the technology side, like what types of data, besides satellite imagery, if anything, are you using? What would you like to have more of, and what are you using for like training sets for the deep learning?
Yeah, we are using, we're very excited about LiDAR. There are certain areas of the world, the US in particular, and Canada in particular, for example, in which we have a lot of data available, airborne LiDAR captured data. Yeah, we're using that to sort of like, do an estimation of biomass, to do tree counting, and yes, comparing that data to estimations that have been done in the ground, right? We're looking at all the data that's out there, right? And again, some of my team members have been focused on that, on collecting data. We're uploading a lot to Google Earth Engine, by the way. We're using Google Earth Engine, it's an awesome product. Yeah, talking to the companies that are bringing on new data. One data source we're very excited is the JEDI program. Basically, NASA sent LiDAR to the International Space Station, and they're going to be scanning all the forests of the world. It's not going to be a complete scan. They're going to have like dots on each sort of like a hectare of land. But with that later data, we're going to be able to train models and then, you know, basically extrapolate or use those models. Yeah.
Yeah. Are you looking at the different types of trees? So whether it's a chestnut or oak or eucalyptus, and how fast they grow? And
yeah, I mean, definitely it's important to know the species because they have different carbon density and therefore, you know, different carbon capturing capacity in a way, different rates of growth. With LiDAR, it's starting to become possible to do species detection, but it's early. We think in a few years it's going to be definitely possible. But yeah, you do need to know species. Yeah.
How does your research interact with California's desire to go carbon neutral by 2045, but we're burning tens of hundreds of thousands of hectares more per year right now? How does that play out in this, and who's responsible for that release from forests?
Yeah. I mean, definitely, California is very proactive, and the cap and trade carbon program is one of the best in the world. It still needs to have.
Do they take a hit when they burn the forest? Do they have to adjust their cap?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I'm not sure how the forest fires play on their models, and unfortunately, we're gonna have more fires with warming, right? But definitely, I mean, again, this is about now bringing more funding to restore those forests. But yes, definitely, we're interested on collaborating more with California on that front.
I'm a huge fan. I really love this technology, you know that. But I'm super curious to know what are the other social value, carbon value that you are bringing with this technology, not only from the tree perspective, but also the biodiversity, like the species that, you know, from the fauna that it's in there. How you guys are gonna publicize, I mean, capitalize over this, because you can really sell a credit over premium cost if you know how many real species you have in a forest. So are you guys thinking of this?
Yeah, I mean, definitely there are several protocols, like there's a Plan Vivo protocol that considers biodiversity and community impact as well. You know, the Red Plus program in the Amazon will have a lot of impact on indigenous communities that live on those forests. And there's always a social impact. So these protocols will hope to help make those protocols work. For example, I was talking today with someone about building a mobile app that helps the people on the ground also do the sort of like collection of data, but also the monitoring. You know, so this it's definitely something to consider. And again, it's one of the things that these type of projects have as an additional benefit of just capturing carbon.
Are you also involved in like the blue carbon space, so like also mangroves?
Definitely super exciting. We haven't studied it a lot, but yes, I mean we will definitely look into it. There's a huge potential, and there aren't many protocols that pay enough attention to it. There's a lot that can be known with satellite images about the state of ocean forest. So yes, exciting space. Definitely we want to take a look at it.
Yeah, in Alameda, we have a company called Sail Drone, so it's going out in the oceans looking at the kelp forests, phytoplankton, and so forth. But in forestry, I'm wondering if you're thinking of partnering with some of the drone companies to plant trees, like biocarbon engineering and other ones. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I spoke with biocarbon engineering, with drone seed as well. I think what they're doing is super exciting and useful. If this works and we can drive, billions of dollars into this type of projects, we will need technologies to do the reforestation faster. And yes, I think that these companies are exciting. We share investors with one of them, so yes, definitely we'll partner with them.
So are you looking to grow beyond just, I know there's no market for air pollutants, so are you looking to go beyond carbon to estimating how much like forests can take up pollutants and SOx and NOx and all of the PM, quite a few advantages.
Yeah, I'll say, for now, we have to be super focused on making this, small thing work, and small thing is actually quite big, but so for now, we're just going to focus on the voluntary market, specific geographies in which we can help accelerate the verification of carbon credits and connect the parties. But yes, in the future, hopefully, we can be a source of data and knowledge for all sort of projects around the forest and around the environment in general.
If you look at what happens with solar, right? Solar had financing issues, and there are companies, and now the name is escaping, one in San Francisco, that is venturing into insurance and that kind of stuff because they have the data to evaluate the risk, and now solar is easier to finance, and so everything is easier. And solar, it's a big capital cost at the beginning, so the radiation is free, so
yeah,
it's very important to enable projects.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, the data, there's going to be an explosion of data, and it's going to be important to be able to harness it. So
yeah, we make it financing from impossible to routine. So.
Yeah.
So following up, there was a paper about a decade or so ago that showed that it was a simulation that if you reforested in like a clear-cut area in the north, like in Canada, where it's very snowy, that the trees would actually increase warming rather than decrease because you're removing some of the snow cover. Do you know, I mean, that's now 10, 12 years old. I don't know if the science has changed or the carbon markets have changed to sort of incorporate that of where, like if you've got a tree growing in the north but it's displacing snow, will that have a lower value in the carbon market?
Yeah, I did see those papers, and I think it's a other things are happening in polar areas that are causing the albedo effect, right? I mean, the ice is melting and the land is becoming browner, and that is producing more warming. But yes, definitely there are places in which trees have a better carbon capturing impact than in others. That's why we want to focus on tropical forests, frankly. Tropical forests are the carbon capturing machine of the planet. And, but yeah, I mean, that being said, I think that in the poles, there's areas in which reforesting at mass scale makes sense, in others maybe not, and it's important to use the data to know where, yeah.
Without being too specific, just generally speaking, like who are your investors now? Who are you giving your service to, and like how do you see the growth of your company?
Can you repeat that question?
So who are our investors and our customers? So I mean, definitely confidential information. But I can share that we just did Y Combinator. Very fortunate to have that community helping us out, and as a result of Y Combinator, we did raise a round that we haven't announced yet, but two of the investors already tweeted about it, so I guess that they made it public, and they're great investor, Chris Saka, who was the first investor in Uber and Twitter, and Paul Graham, who's the founder of YC and first investor in Airbnb. So yes, we're very lucky to have the validation of those folks that also have access to more capital and to other great companies in Silicon Valley. So yes, we want to start here. In terms of companies that we're going to reach out to sell carbon credits, we're going to focus here in Silicon Valley, where there are forward-looking companies that care. So yeah.
Maybe you covered this earlier and I missed it, but do you only focus on modeling and calculating above ground biomass carbon sequestration? Or do you also have the abilities with your technology and algorithms to look at in-ground sequestration that might be fungal or other organism mediated?
Yeah, for now it's above ground verification. Definitely there's a huge potential of below ground, but I think with remote sensing is going to be difficult for some time. Eventually, yes. I mean, there are models that can be built. I guess with advanced lidar and combining that with ground data. But yes, we're aware of the big potential of soil.
Yeah, another way to fund this would be, there's a company in Seattle called Nori. It's like the sushi, and they're doing a cryptocurrency where one coin, one token would equal 1 ton of sequestered carbon verified. They're starting with regenerative agriculture first, using biochar and so forth, which I recommend for the planting trees. And they're looking to go to trees and then eventually to kelp forests, as that can be verified as well.
Yeah, I know those guys. It's awesome what they're doing, and yes, we want to see more and more startups trying different approaches. All right, thank you very much.
Anyone? All right.
So thank you all for coming. We've got about 30 minutes before they kick us out. So next month, our next event, so we've got a partner event this coming Monday, which is Earth Day. So get out this weekend, go to someplace wild. And then on Monday up in San Rafael is the showing of the No Return documentary. It's the documentary of the Solar Impulse plane, a totally solar-powered airplane that flew around the globe. Didn't make it on its first attempt in 2005, 2006, but did in 2015. And we'll be showing that in Oakland at the end of June. But our next Tech Talk is on May 8th. It'll be at Orange, Silicon Valley, and we're covering electric aviation. So just confirming up our 2 speakers right now, and then this will go out shortly. So thank you again, and please stay, mingle, have more food, share, and yeah, help save the planet. Thank you.
No, you didn't. Because
base it on.
Were you doing that, Tesla? Oh, really? Who do you know?
Gosh.
Yeah, we do have Tesla.
Yeah, well, there was one guy who started with Tesla, went to Seattle, came back to Tesla. I forget her names. And now there's Morgan.
Morgan, yeah, she's several times.
Like supply chain.
Yeah.
Hey, Sam.